The Fetch Records logic block action enables you to retrieve data from various sources within Nextworld. In this video, we demonstrate how to create a logic block to fetch records for a customer invoicing application. When a user enters a number into the job number field, the logic block will be triggered to fetch records about multiple tasks from a job details table, perform a calculation on the price of each task, and enter the fetched records into a subtable attached to the customer invoicing application. We selected the Fetch Records logic block action because it enables the system to return multiple rows of data that meet the specified criteria and insert them into a subtable. This logic block will consist of 4 actions. Fetch Records action. This action tells the system which table to fetch records from, creates a data source that we will use later in the logic block, and sets expressions to define which records to fetch and enter into the application. If no expressions are defined, the fetch will return every single record in the job details table. So it is important to enter expressions that are specific to the records you need for your use case. This action also creates data found and no data sections of the logic block. The data found section of the logic block is used to configure actions to run for each record returned by the fetch. Our example logic block will run 2 actions for each record. Insert Subtable Record action. This action will insert the fetched records into the invoice application. The Add action will calculate the total cost of each completed task. The No Data section of the logic block is used to configure the actions to run if either or both expressions from the Fetch Records step are not satisfied. Interrupt with Error action. For this example, when no data is returned, an error message will be displayed. There are a few pieces of information we need to build this logic block. From the customer invoice application, we need the name of the table the application is built on, the data item names for the job number, total task amount, and subtable fields. And from the subtable, the task description and cost fields. From the job detail table, we need the table name and the data item names for the job number, task ID, task description, status, and task cost fields. The last piece of information we need is the name of the message data item which will be used for the error message. If you are not familiar with message data items, check out Nextworld documentation. We are now ready to build a logic block to fetch records. We have navigated to the general configuration page of the logic block builder. This is where we enter the configuration details for the logic block. Select the name field and enter a name for the logic block. The name is required when attaching the logic block to the application. Open the logic block type menu and choose Transaction. Now fill in the rest of the required fields. Since we are attaching this logic block to the customer invoicing application, we need to enter the name of the table that this application is built on into the table name field. Select Save and Stay. And then open the logic block builder page. This is where we configure the logic block. The first action tells the system where to find the records we want to fetch. Locate the Actions panel and the Action Name field. Enter Fetch. From the list that appears, drag Fetch Records onto the logic block panel. We use the Properties panel to configure the action. Let's drag the panel to the left to get a better view of the section of the screen we are working in. In the Choose a Table field, we enter the name for the job details table. This is where the records to be fetched are stored. Since we are fetching records from the job detail table, In the name field, enter Fetch Job Detail. We use this data source in later steps to reference the fetched records. Let's scroll down to get a better view of the fields we're working with. Next, we set up expressions to define the conditions for fetching data. When a user enters a value into the job number field of the customer invoicing application, the first expression will match it to the corresponding record in the job number field of the Fetch Job Detail data source. Once the job numbers are matched, the second expression will check if the identified record has a status of completed. Since we have two expressions to configure, we select Add Expression twice. Let's scroll down to get a better view. Then use the Options menu to select And. This tells the system that both conditions must be met for the action to be considered successful and to advance to the data found actions. Let's configure the first expression. The table field is pre-populated with the data source name we created above. Open the Field menu and select the Job Number field. This is the field from the data source that will identify which records to fetch. In the Options menu, select Equals. This sets the requirement that the record found in this field is the same as the record found in the field we set in the second part of the expression. Use the Type menu to select Field, and use the Table menu to select the table this logic block is attached to. For this example, we select Customer Invoicing. This is the same table we entered on the General Configuration page. Open the Field menu and select the application field that must match the data source field we selected in the previous step. We select Job Number. Now let's configure the second expression. Notice the Type and Table fields are already filled in. Open the Field menu and select Status, which is the data source field that needs to match the value we are about to select. In the Options menu, select Equals. Open the Type menu and select Constant. Open the Constant menu. The job status field of the Fetch table is a list lookup that has several options which are listed here. We select Completed. We have finished configuring this action. When triggered, the action tells the system to check if the job number entered into the application matches a job number in the data source, and if the status for that job is completed. If both expressions are satisfied, the data is considered found. If one or both expressions are not satisfied, then the data is considered not found. Next, we define what happens when the expressions are satisfied. When data is found, this logic block will perform two actions: Insert Subtable Record and Add. We set up the Insert Subtable Record action first. Return to the Actions panel. In the Action Name field, enter Insert. Next, drag Insert Subtable Record to the Data Found section of the Logic Block panel. We use the Properties panel to match the fetched records to fields in the Customer Invoicing application subtable. The first step is to identify the field in the Customer Invoicing application that contains the subtable. Use the Table menu to select Customer Invoicing, and use the Field menu to select Job Task subtable. In the Name field, enter a name for the data source created by this action. We enter Job Task Map. Next, we identify the subtable fields that will be populated with the source data. Scroll down and select Field Mappings and show optional fields. Scroll down until you locate the task field and use the Type menu to select Field. In the Table field, select Fetch Job Detail and use the Field menu to select Task ID. This tells the system to map the task ID from the Fetch Task Detail record to the subtable row being inserted. We repeat these steps to match the description and cost fields. This completes the configuration for the Insert a Record action. This action will populate the task ID, description, and task amount fields in the application subtable from records fetched from the jobs detail table when both expressions set in the Fetch Records action are met. The next action will add the amount listed in each record's cell price field to the amount listed in the customer invoice application's total task amount field. Return to the Action panel and clear the text in the Action Name field. And drag Add to the Logic Block panel and place it under Insert a Record. We use the Properties panel to configure the action. In the Select Field for Result section, we identify the field to populate with the result of the equation. Type is Field. Table is Customer Invoicing. And Field is the total task amount field in the Customer Invoicing application. Scroll down. Next, we identify where the system should look to find the amounts to add together. In the Select Fields to Sum section, Type is Field. Table is Customer Invoicing. And Field is Total Task Amount. This tells the system that the first term in the expression is the amount listed in the Customer Invoicing application's Total Task Amount field. The second term is the amount listed in the source table's Task Cost field. Type is Field. Table is Fetch Job Detail. And Field is the Task Cost field. This action will add the amount in each record's Task Cost field to the amount listed in the Customer Invoicing application's Total Task Amount field. We are now ready to configure the error message to appear when one or both expressions set in the fetch action are not met and no data is found. Return to the Actions panel and enter an asterisk and error in the Action Name field. Then drag Interrupt with Error into the No Data Found section of the Logic Block panel. Once again, we use the Properties panel to configure this action. In the Message Data Item field, enter the data item name that holds the error message. Open the Message Type menu and select Alert. This will trigger the system to display an error message when the expressions we set in the fetch action are not met. We have finished the configuration of this logic block. Select Save and Stay. The final step is to attach the logic block to the application. We have navigated to the Customer Invoicing application. In the Properties panel, select the Wide View button and make sure the application name is selected. Then select Actions. Locate Event Actions and select Add. Open the Event menu and select Field Exited. In the field name, enter the data item name of the field that will trigger the logic block. For this example, we enter job number. For action, enter the name of the logic block we just created. The logic block is now set up to work with this application. Select Save and Stay. And since we made changes to the application, select Generate. Now let's see our logic block in action. Open the Action menu and select Launch. When the application opens, select Create. First, we test the No Data Found scenario by entering a job number that does not satisfy the set expressions. Notice the error message. Now let's test the data found scenario by entering a job number that satisfies both expressions. Notice the subtable fields are now populated, and the total task amount field has been updated. We have successfully configured a Fetch Records logic block. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. To learn more about this topic, please refer to Nextworld Help.